What's up, comic and hop culture Dans? This is James with Minhunter Comics, and today we're going to dive into those conspiracy theories around pressing. Is it actually good for your comics? Pressing is something that's been so institutionalized into our hobby for decades that it's not really a question we ask anymore, but maybe it should. Full disclosure, I am of the opinion that pressing absolutely does help your comics. I've just seen too many examples of it transform and bring a book back to its former glory. All my best Green Lantern books are mainly from one dude who heavily does not believe in pressing. And when I ask him about it, he's very adamant about it. He thinks that that book is that book and you shouldn't touch it. And full disclosure, some of his books that were like a 9.0, I was able to press and get a 9.2, and even in one instance, a 9.4. But as you may or may not know, pressing can't get everything. It's best suited for those small bumps and oddball things on your comic. Creases, folds, some dampness, that sort of thing. But there's a lot press can't do, like color breaking spine ticks, dog ears. But to just give you the quick 30-second history on pressing, it was not always so commonplace. In fact, it was actually pretty controversial. Largely more like 20 years ago. A lot of people thought it was restoration. I don't. You probably don't. But one or two people in the comments, usually when I talk about pressing, they still emerge. So let's talk about them. Let's give them some light. I can hear an argument that some people think it is restoration. I think it's not, because you're not actually adding or taking away anything from a book. You're literally just ironing it out, like a t-shirt. To me, it's almost like showering before a date or getting facial reconstruction surgery before a date. Some people feel, though, that taking that shower is restoration. Now, in more recent years, I will tell you that some cleaning techniques actually are starting to get purple labels over from CGC. Sometimes those deep cleans and whitenings will get you the purple label. Too much is too much, and if you do completely change the book, yeah, maybe you are restoring it. But I maintain that a dry clean and press should not be considered restoration. But let's ask the question that you're all here for today, which is, does pressing actually help comics? And there are some conspiracy theories around this. For one thing, do grading companies know when a book's been pressed? Yes, they're well aware and they can see that the books have been pressed. So it is usually disclosed, and CGC and any professional grader can have the eye to see that a book has been pressed. Now, is that good or bad? The side that says it's bad says that CGC, PGX, CBCS, all these grading companies might actually judge it to a harsher standard. Now, I can neither confirm nor deny. I have seen personal examples of submissions that, frankly, no press, pulled all 9.8s, and some submissions that full press, I got 9.4s and 9.6s. It's nearly impossible to say. I can tell you that my most recent submission that had 9.8 or net were books that were never pressed. So the whole do they judge it harsher, they know it's been pressed, just can't confirm it for you. Just know that they're gonna know that it was pressed. One camp says the problem with pressing is it now makes the book as good as it'll ever be. And it begs the question, what if a different presser could have done better? But you've stamped it in now, and that's the best that book can be. Some people think that books that have been completely untouched have a higher value because they've never been tampered with. I don't agree with the term tampering with, because I think it makes the book flat like how it was off of the shelf, but that is just me. Some people really like going after those older slabs, knowing that pressing wasn't so prevalent back then, and it's fun to get books that have really high grades that have never been touched yet. On the other side of that, most people are getting those books to try to clean and press them and maybe get a tiny grade bump. Regardless, pressing is a fairly definitive goal. You are making that book the best it can possibly be, and there is nowhere for it to go after that, usually. So does it really devalue your comic book if it's already been pressed and you know that there is no more room to grow? Or is it better to have a completely stock book that's never been once pressed or treated in any kind of way for not only its potential, but for its raw coolness of, look at the grade this got just from 1969. A lot of what this comes down to is good pressers versus bad pressers. An experienced presser is going to be able to do their best and work on that book, and that whole the best it's going to be, they're going to make that a pretty darn good best it's going to be. A mediocre presser might not put the same love and care into it. A lot of you might not know that books require multiple runs through the press in order to get it to that peak condition. A lot of you also might not know that some people, in order to save time, just up the heat and humidity, which can actually cause the book to kind of shrink back a little bit if you rush that sort of thing. So you have to find a patient presser that's willing to take the time and possible multiple presses to handle that book. And they're absolutely out there, and frankly, you can learn to do it yourself relatively easily. I'm not 100% on my pressing abilities, but I've definitely got 9.8s that would not have been 9.8s if I didn't touch them. But the most important thing I'm going to say here is that even the best presser in the world is gonna have a blip or two. It is going to happen. Not every book is the same. Sometimes there are some defects that can arise after a press. Sometimes when you fill out a form online, there might be a little waiver that says an improvement is not guaranteed and possible even damage could incur. I gotta tell you, it's really rare, but I've seen it happen. Usually I've seen it happen with CGC's in-house, which used to be called CCS. Now I think it's just CGC. And I thought maybe that's just because they're not taking the same amount of time that like my local guy might do. But the reality is they actually are giving it a pretty good press. I've seen some miraculous things come out of their in-house pressing, and even the best of the best, like I said, will have a problem on occasion. I've had more than a few examples with popped staples. Sometimes the placement of that staple after a press might cause it to pop out of where the paper was and not hold it. That's called a pop staple, and that could get you a green label. Not ideal. You got to remember that for the pressing, you're putting various degrees of heat up against a book. And while you can have a 99% success, you're going to have that 1%. Also, you have to be really careful if a hair or piece of dirt gets into that book. It's going to be stamped into that book and is a nightmare to get out afterwards. And that can cause pitting in your book. It can also cause some ink lift, particularly if the book was previously signed. It can slightly pull up some of that ink off of the page. Sometimes if it's a brittle book, it can start to pull off some chips. Granted, I personally know a little bit better. I don't even bother sending brittle books to get pressed, but some people still do, and the inevitable happens. It pulls a piece or two off. But one of the biggest things that I don't think is talked about enough is those books that have offset staples. I'm talking about where you see the staples more like towards the front of the book rather than nice and neatly on the side. Tamping down on books where the staple is on the top facing the front, just like the cover. I've seen it happen that can actually start to fold ever so slightly around the staples. So when I look at a book for pressing, I really like making sure that A, the book needs it truly, and that the staples are nice and neatly on the side. It does make a big difference. That's something just experience will show you, but a lot of you might be saying like, hey, this book looks worse, I could almost swear. It's possible. If your staples were on the front, yeah, that could totally happen. There's another theory to which I can't totally disagree with here. It's when you've got a perfect comic book and you send it in and get it pressed just as like an extra precaution. If a book doesn't need a press, and you will find them, books that look to be 9.8 ready, send it in as is. If you really can't see anything wrong, I wouldn't bother with the clean and press. Because now you're taking a book that looks perfect, you're solidifying that it stays perfect. That's silly. You are now risking a possible fold. You're risking worsening one of the spine ticks. Like I used to tell my old job, if it's not broken, don't fix it. A lot of my best modern 9.8 submissions are books that I've only had to press maybe one or two, and I throw in a bunch of books that are like already perfect, and I've had 20 out of 25, 22 out of 25, sometimes even 25 out of 25. So that's one of the conspiracy theories I kind of tend to side with. Don't get perfect books pressed. It usually isn't going to make a difference, but it could. And do you want to risk that? A couple people out there have seen that pressing can sometimes make a spine tick worse. Now here's the thing on that. That's really rare. I've seen it probably twice. I think they're oddball scenarios, but I'm going to talk about them. You have a non-color breaking spine tick? Man, pressing's got you, bro. That can get that gone with a good presser. Bye-bye. When you have that color breaking spine tick, sometimes after a press, it can actually make it worse. Sometimes with color breaking spine ticks though, I've seen them appear more prominent after a press. Now it's possible that's because the book is like more perfect now and you're extra looking at that particular flaw, sticks out more. But there have been times where I actually could swear that, yeah, I think that spine tick is actually bigger. And that brings us back to the whole good presser, bad presser. Get a guy or gal worth their stones and they should be able to help you with that. Just know that even though it has a nice high success rate, it is still a risk. And yeah, I have seen it, so I can't say I haven't. Sometimes spine ticks have come out worse. Sometimes the staples on the top of the book will have more folds around those staples. I have not yet to see this. I guess I have really good pressers, but I have yet to see that ink pull. But I know there's a lot of people that have seen that, especially when it comes to signatures. So to recap for you, is it restoration? I don't think so, because you're not adding anything to the book. You're not taking anything away from the book. You're ironing out a shirt, you're taking that shower before a date. You just got to make sure it's a damn good shower and a good ironing job. Be mindful that if you're sending in a perfect book and it comes back a 9.6 or a 9.4, it's possible that a press did introduce a flaw into that book. Be mindful that if your book was overheated and too much humidity, you could get the book to possibly shrink back a little bit. Be mindful that a nice, long, slow press is needed, and sometimes multiple pressing is needed on your books. Pressing is a deep art of cleaning, my friends, and you want to make sure you're sending it to a good cleaner. But just know that probability is going to give you 1 or 2 duds in every 100. Definitely a fun conversation. Not one I think I've had before on this channel. I want you to pop down below if you think those oopsies that you've seen are just allowable, or if they turned you off to pressing completely. Are you one of those old heads that still think that pressing is restoration? I'll hear it all. Pop it down below. Love you all. Don't forget to like on the way out. It helps the channel grow and it reaches more and more viewers. And I'll see you at the next video. And before I leave, I just want to let you know that the entire month of August, any Fantastic Four, including slabs at the antique shop, is going to be 30% off. I just got a big Fantastic Four batch in, so I need to get this gone and new stuff in. 30% off the entire month of August for Fantastic Four. I'll see you at the next video, and keep on hunting.